you for your patience. Can everyone hear me back in the back? Great. Okay. My name is Mandy Roberts, and I am your host and facilitator for today. I am a professional facilitator, and I do a lot of work for the federal government on different assignments. I've done work here locally at Pecos National Historical Park and facilitated meetings there, which is really fun. So today, we want to just cover a few kind of initial remarks and housekeeping issues, and then we'll get started with an overall presentation, and then the better part of the morning, we're going to have two different group discussions, which we'll explain to you in a minute. So the first thing I really want to do is welcome all of you here and thank you for your time today. We know people are busy and we appreciate that you've come here. It's a great turnout, so it's going to be a really productive day for us to get a lot of input. And with that said, I'd like to recognize elected officials, government representatives that are here. I know we have somebody from the governor's office. Would you mind standing and introducing yourself? I thought we had somebody from the governor's office here. No? Okay, well.
I'm not from the governor's office,
you're
but
not.
I do work with the New Mexico Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department, and my name is Jeremy Lewis. Good morning.
Okay, good morning, Jeremy. Thank you. And then we also have Mr. Campbell here from the Department of the Interior. Would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, I'm with the Secretary's office at the Department of Interior, and it's great to be here.
And then I believe we have a representative from Senator Udall's office.
Morning, Guati Alpa. Josh Sanchez, Senator Tom Udall's office, Albuquerque.
Thank you. And then also a representative from Congressman Pearson's office.
Yes, good morning. My name is Barbara Romero, and I'm glad to be here today.
Okay, thank you. And are there any other federal, state? Oh, yes, please.
Hi, Poqueen Rivera with Representative Lujan Christian's office.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, with that, what we'd like to do is give all of you a chance to briefly introduce yourselves as well. We'll go around the room. If you could just tell us your name and any agency or organization that you might be representing today, that would be great. Oh, yes.
Before we do that, let's announce the video.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I was going to do this later, but just for everybody's knowledge, today's workshop is being recorded by a grassroots organization called Common Ground Community Trust. And Mike is here doing the filming. And that will be made available so people can review, right, as a public recording. So thank you. Also, we have a website. I think most of you have seen that website. You've been on it, you've been studying it, but just for ready reference, it's up here on the wall. And that's where information will continue to be available on the project. Okay, now let's do introductions around the room. You could just say your name and where you're from briefly.
Nina Honecker, and I'm with Crestwood.
Melanie Vargas, and I'm with Crestwood.
David Alderman, Bureau of Land Management.
Debbie Lucero, Bureau of Land Management, New Mexico.
Kelsey Hirschman, Bureau of Land Management, New Mexico.
James Cassidy, Lucky Corridor.
Lynn Green, CEO, Lucky Corridor.
Marcel Fiedler with New Mexico Gas. Pamela Stone with New Mexico Gas.
Sophie Sheamus with the New Mexico Wildlife Federation.
Sandy Johnson, I'm with the Las Placitas Association.
Good morning. Canoe Stout, Pueblo of San Felipe, Director for Natural Resources.
Yeah, Sadie Tom.
Ben Chavarria, from Santa Clara Pueblo.
Good morning. My name is Mark Mitchell, former governor for the Pueblo of Chisuki and current HIPPO for the tribe.
Mike Taylor, National Park Service, National Trails, Internet Region.
Susan Osley with the Great Old Broads for Wilderness, the Rio Grande Valley Broadband. Katie Whitebull, BLM.
Good morning, Patrick Padilla, New Mexico Oil and Gas Association. Good morning, Clyde Ward, New Mexico State Land Office.
Warren Jarrett, New Mexico State Land Office.
Phil Brockman with Landowners of Union County.
Earl Brown, Landowner Association, Des Moines and Union County.
Greg Wortham with the Texas Wind Energy Clearinghouse.
Susie Hutcherson with Union County Landowner Group.
David Brown, Union County Landowners.
Erin Montoya, Community Planner for Kirtland Air Force Base.
Carl Chicarelli, Kirtland Air Force Base.
Ian Reese, Kirtland Air Force Base.
Glenn Garnin, planner for BLM.
Robert Gomez, Bureau of Land Management, out of Carlsbad, New Mexico.
San Juan Arriola, Realty Specialist, Carlsbad Office, BLM.
Okay, how about, yeah, table, thank you.
Kristen Long, Rio Puerto Field Office, BLM.
Ann Reed, Rio Puerto Field Office, BLM. Hi there, Kim Stevens with the Wilderness Society.
Brenda Smythe, Edgewood Soil and Water Conservation District.
Ellen White with Argonne National Laboratory in support of BLM and Forest Service.
Jonathan Smith, Bureau of Land Management.
Virginia Allgaier, Realty Specialist in the Socorro BLM office.
Will Reed, Forest Service Heritage Program.
Hi, Becky Cross from the U.S. Forest Service here in Albuquerque, New Mexico Regional Office. And this is Heather Snow. She's kind of lost her voice, so U.S. Forest Service here in the regional office at Albuquerque.
Hi, I'm Jane Childress. I'm an archaeologist for BLM on the National Project Support Team.
My name's Ira Pearson. I'm the county manager of Luna County, southern New Mexico.
Okay, great. How about those folks in the back, and you're going to get to meet Jeremy really soon. Jeremy, if you want to start just introducing the
Sure. My name is Jeremy Bluma. I'm the National Project Manager for the Westwide Energy Corridor Regional Reviews with Bureau of Land Management. Counterpart is Reggie Woodruff with the Forest Service. Wanted to say just thanks for your participation and taking the time out of your schedule today. We'll talk more in a bit.
And Ron Kellenmueller, Mexico Property Game and Fish, the Mining and Energy Habitat Specialist.
Good morning, I'm Jillian Aragon, Farmington Field Office, BLM.
Good morning, I'm Reggie Woodruff, as Jeremy mentioned, the Forest Service lead for the 368 corridor reviews.
Hi, I'm Connie Westcott, I'm with Argonne National Laboratory. I'm the Argonne Project Manager supporting BLM and Forest Service.
Great, okay. We got our data. Let's go to the second one.
I'm Virginia Mayo, I'm with BLM in the Washington office, in the Office of Renewable Energy and Rights of Way.
Jim Kuiper, Argonne National Laboratory.
Okay, and let's start with you, sir. Yeah, on this side.
What's Damian Garcia with the Pueblo Bacama officer.
Yeah, same time with Danny Naranjo, Santa Clara Pueblo.
Second time, Jesse Gutierrez from Santa Clara Pueblo Rights Protection Office. Nice to see everybody.
Stephen Gallegos, BLM, Mexico State Office.
Zoe Lee's the Model Swirling Law Firm.
You already introduced yourself, sorry. Yeah, you too. Okay, you then.
I'm Crystal Seberian, I'm Northern Applicable.
Okay. Has anybody come in that hasn't introduced themselves at this point? Did we get everyone? Wait. Oh, yes, sir. Yeah.
Franklin Martinez, Pueblo Bacama Natural Resource and Realty Director.
Thank you. Yes. Good. Yeah. Okay, great. So I also want to really thank our co-hosts for this workshop, the U.S. Forest Service and the BIA, who has graciously provided these facilities. This is a great room for our meeting. And I don't know, Reggie, did you want to say anything more as far as welcoming the group, or do you think we have that covered?
I was going to tag team whatever Jeremy was doing. Yeah, thank you for coming. Yes, thanks to BIA, if there is anyone in the room, for allowing us to use this facility. I think it's kind of a good place to have a meeting. And so I've, as mentioned, I'm the Forest Service lead on the corridor review, working with BLM. Been engaged with this for several years now, and it looks like we're gathering some momentum as far as looking at the viability of the corridors, and part of that is engaging with you, the public, to ensure that we have your input. That's the purpose of the meeting today. Jeremy will talk a little bit more about that, to gather as much information as possible to make these corridors as viable as possible for supporting energy development, but also doing our part as stewards of the public lands and National Forest System lands to ensure that we're protecting the vital resources, cultural resources, viewsheds, and whatnot. So thank you again for coming. We look forward to engaging with you today and moving forward through this process.
Thank you, Reggie. Okay. So just a few housekeeping ideas or thoughts here. Everybody has an agenda inside your white folder. If you haven't had a chance to look that over, take a look. We are going to be taking some breaks today. Phew, good. So on that note, you probably saw when you came in, but restrooms are out in the hallway to the right. Drinking fountains are out to the left. In case of an emergency or if there is a fire alarm, and yesterday there was some kind of a beeping, but we weren't sure when we were practicing and prepping, we weren't sure if there was a fire alarm or not. But just in case, you can exit out of either door here, and you can exit at that end of the building, but really the fastest way out is the way you came in through the front entrance there. So that's the way that we should file out if we need to in case of a fire alarm. Also, there is a defibrillator in the hallway right next to this room. Hopefully we won't need that as a reason, as an outcome of the meeting, but in case we need to use it, it's just right outside, and there's also a fire extinguisher right outside. I wanted to just kind of go through a few ground rules. As you saw, we have a really broad spectrum of interest here, and as Reggie mentioned, we're here to listen, to get your ideas, get your perspectives. So with that in mind, we really want everybody to share your thoughts, and please don't be shy. Please provide input. I'll talk about some different ways that you can provide input in a minute. We want to value and respect each other and our different points of view today, and that means when other people are speaking, please let them have the floor. We won't want to have any interruptions, and we only want to have one person speaking at a time so we can all hear the comments that are being said. And that said, let's just I'll keep an eye on how much time we're talking, and I know I'm talking a lot right now, but in group sessions today, if you feel like you might be talking too much and you know other people in your group need to have a say, just restrain for a bit and let's make sure we're getting everybody's perspectives at the table. Another important thing is we really want you to be present today. We need your brain power front and center. We have a lot of really important issues to discuss. So if you can refrain from being on your phone or checking your phone, there's not really good cell service here anyway, just so you know. We would really appreciate that. Also, we have multiple ways that you can provide input. So we're going to have some group discussion sessions in a little bit later this morning. And with that, we're going to be documenting what we hear, taking notes, and that'll be part of the record of this meeting. But we also have comment cards if you want to make sure and leave a written comment. They're blue. I guess I don't have one anymore, but they're back at the table. And you should have one in your form. There we go. Connie's holding those up. We have them around the room. You have one in your folder, but if you need more, we have more as well. So that's one option. Also, we're going to have breaks and time to mill around, and if a question occurs to you during that time and you want to ask one of us in the room from the team, feel free to do that. And then Jeremy, who's the project manager, his contact information is available. He left business cards at the front desk. Is that correct? Yeah. That's correct. So in case you're back at the office or back home and you think of something, you want to talk about it or email Jeremy about it, feel free to do that. So with that, I'm going to I don't think we have time to capture everybody's thoughts on this, but I wanted to just capture a few key ideas or interests. What is most interesting to you, or what are you most concerned about in coming here today? We just want to make sure that, before we leave, that these ideas, and I'm calling it the idea garden or the discussion garden, that we've had an opportunity to address that or have a conversation about that, or if not, follow up with you later on that if you have a question. So I'll just take by raising hands, and I'll just write a few of these up on the chart here. So who wants to be brave and go first? What's your main interest in coming here today? Yes, thank you.
New Mexico has 2 of the best wind energy zones in the world, and also has the #1 quality of solar energy by being in the southwest and also having altitude. We also have the largest retiring coal hub in America. So the challenge is, how do you get New Mexico's renewable energy to repower its coal hub while protecting all the public interests in some of the most gorgeous land in the world?
Okay, I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit, and we'll document this in the notes, but it's just for shorthand. While protecting. Okay, who else would like to share something that's important to talk about and address today from the group? Yes, sir.
The protection of cultural resources. I mean, New Mexico is such a diverse place and has a lot of cultural resources. So that's always been important, especially to the Native communities, is the protection of those cultural resources and traditional cultural properties.
Yes. Yes.
Well, to follow up on the gentleman's comments, 2 of those cultural resources are long-distance trails, the Camino Real de Tierra Adentro, National Historic Trail, and the Old Spanish National Historic Trail. And those 2 trails, there's a potential for impacts to those 2 trails with some of the proposed energy corridors.
Yes.
The reason I came was to see something that I really don't get a lot of information on is the health impacts.
Okay.
Really don't see a lot of that. And then also, what type of energy are you trying to do? You know, there's wind and solar, but I know a lot of the tribes in New Mexico have been against the geothermal. And, you know, we don't always get wind or solar, so that's something that is a concern for me. I want to know actually what energy sources are that you're going after.
Another thought? Yes, at the table back there?
Yeah, priority for us is avoiding wilderness quality lands, and then having a path to revise corridors to avoid impacts where possible, and then if impacts are not, you cannot avoid them, then having a commitment to mitigation.
Okay, I'm trying to write fast, but also make it so you guys can read it. Let's see. I will ask for a volunteer. Thank you, Georgiana. Do you want to just put these up over here? So we can refer to them later today and make sure things are getting addressed that we talked about. Yes, you have something you want to add? Yeah.
I just want to know if there has been any tribal surveys done with the tribes to
tribal
surveys.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay.
To document any sacred sites or things from oral histories that the tribes may have that will take into consideration for the trails in the corridor.
And my job right now, just so you know, my job is to write these things down. And then I know Jeremy's going to touch on some of this in his presentation later. And then when we get into the group discussions, we'll be able to have an even more detailed discussion about some of these. So that's why I'm not answering right now. And I'm not the technical expert either, so I shouldn't answer. Yes?
Our primary interest is proximity to wildlife habitat and mitigating any impacts to critical wildlife habitat, and also ensuring access to outdoor recreational opportunities.
Okay, let me just check the clock. I think we have room for a couple more. Yes, yes.
I want to piggyback on that.
we're concerned about the obstruction of wildlife corridors.
Okay. Okay, any more? Yes.
My comment is just to share the primary purpose of the New Mexico Energy Roadmap, which is to strengthen and diversify a New Mexico energy economy that is resilient to global changes.
Energy roadmap, got it. Okay, I think that's good. That's a good starting list. We're going to keep this list up here in case other things come up, and if you have ideas during the break that you want to make sure we're talking about, we'll add on to the list as we go today. So let me just make sure I covered everything that I was on deck to cover today. We talked about ground rules, we did introductions, we talked about the exits and safety, and we talked about other ways to provide input. So I think we're ready to start the presentations. Georgianne, you can start us out.
So again, we are thrilled to have your participation. We indicated we really appreciate the time. People have, some people have traveled quite a long way to be here. So we think this is going to be really productive because of that. So thank you so much. So how did we get here? Why are we all here? We're here because of the energy corridors that you can see on the black lines on this map. The energy corridors are a result of Congress directing federal agencies, the 2005 Energy Policy Act, to designate corridors in the West on federal lands for electric distribution and transmission, and oil and gas pipelines and hydrogen pipelines. So that's the primary purpose of the corridors. The corridors are planning designations. This is where these are going to be our, oh, they can't hear. So let me come forward a little bit. So the Energy Policy Act directed us to designate these corridors for electric transmission and distribution, and oil and gas pipelines and hydrogen pipelines. The two federal agencies that designated corridors were the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management. What you see up there with the black lines are 6,000 miles of corridors, and they're planning designations. They're our preferred location for these future uses for pipelines and power lines, energy pipelines and power lines. So that was in 2005. The corridors have been designated. The agencies did an environmental review and amended land use plans and designated the corridors in 2009. So the corridors have been in place since 2009. For the last 2 years, we have been going back and re-examining the corridors and seeing if we can perhaps adjust their placement. And that, so it's a review process of the energy corridors. That's what we're in right now. When they were first designated, we looked at all 11 states, so it was quite a high-level review. It's a programmatic environmental assessment, environmental impact statement. Well, as we go and look at them in the past 2 years, we're taking it in a smaller bite. We're doing regional reviews so that we can look at a bit closer level. So we're in what we call Region 2 and 3 right now. Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Nevada. That's still quite a large area. So we're doing a meeting in each state right now, and we're here in New Mexico. Jeremy's going to give a little more in depth, just a little, because a lot of the people in this room are already familiar with these energy corridors. So we're going to take a closer look at them in our regional review process. We have a framework for our regional review process. And that framework came from a settlement agreement that we entered into with plaintiffs, a group of plaintiffs, that sued over the corridor designations. So we have a framework, and that framework gave us 4 siting principles to look at these corridors again. We have a shorthand for them, and you have them in your packets. So that's something for you to realize as you're talking in your groups, that as we identify potential changes, they have to meet those 4 requirements in the settlement agreement. But the easy way to say it is they should have minimum impact and maximum utility. That's the point of these corridors. The corridors is to serve as a west-wide energy corridor network, but yet they should have the least impact that we can foresee. So that's about all I'm going to do for the broad picture of how we got here and the time frame. We do have a time frame of the actual EPA Act, corridor designations, settlement agreement, and that was on the door as you came in. So we're definitely happy to talk to you more about that on the breaks and at lunch. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy.
I'll try to speak on it.
And I'll be back.
Thank you. Good morning. Really appreciate everybody joining us. We really need this input. Jim, if you go to the next slide or two, let's see. So, this effort, as Georgianne talked about, I don't want to bore you with all the details, but of course, we're doing this as a joint agency effort between Department of Energy, Department of Interior, BLM, Department of Agriculture, Forest Service. BLM has a multiple use mandate as well as a sustained yield mandate to balance those needs. Forest Service is similar. It's kind of summed up in their motto, caring for the land, serving the people. Putting big energy corridors out on the landscape, that's a challenge. To find that balance, that's an often elusive task to figure out a way to do what Georgianne talked about, which is minimize impacts, but also maximize utility. We need both. We all like to be able to turn on the lights, but we also like that we have a clean environment. And so how do we do that? Well, through this review, we've tried to bring it to a certain point of the existing corridors and what we see as maybe potential needs for other routes to connect energy from point A to point B. I'm hoping that you can share what you know as a subject matter experts in this area of New Mexico, you know, and as far beyond that as you have expertise. I'm excited that you're all here today and appreciate and really value your time. I hope that we can have really great discussions and to try to find a better path for some of these, to find areas where we can do some of the things that we talked about, which is, you know, to protect the wildlife resources, to protect the wilderness resources. There were others, protecting cultural resources. To answer some of the thoughts about that, I look forward to hearing what needs are maybe missed that we haven't really considered fully or comprehensive enough. And so my hope is that, and I feel like success here today for me will be defined as being able to come away with a better understanding of what maybe we have overlooked, what we need to get more information on, what we need to look closer at, and hopefully we can carry that forward not only for New Mexico, but across the entire 11 western contiguous states, since we are really looking at this from a holistic standpoint, from a need for an energy highway. You know, it's something that we recognize a need for, and yet we need to kind of bounce between. You know, if we go here, what does that do? You know, what's the trade-off? Those are the conversations I really hope that we have later on today. And I don't want to belabor this discussion. I know that you've been patient long enough, and I know that there's conversation and dialogue we want to have. And so with that, Jim, you might go to the next. So as Georgianne mentioned, you know, in our Region 2 and 3 review, we have most of Arizona, all of Colorado, about the eastern third of Nevada, all of New Mexico, and all of Utah that we're looking at. Today we're here to talk about the corridors in New Mexico. And we want to hear what's working, what's not. And our job here, my goal, my aim, and I want to set the tone for us all, is to listen. We want to hear those differing perspectives. I value them all. We need to hear each other's, the different perspectives, the different interests. It's a challenge for sure. Next slide, Jim. So these are the corridors across the 11 western states. This is the 5,000 miles across BLM lands and 1,000 miles roughly across Forest Service lands. Next slide, Jim. We have posters around the room. Some show the entire West, some show the siting principles. Some are a little bit more site-specific to a certain corridor. Apologies.
I forgot to say, silence your phones. It's my phone.
So with that, as we have breaks, we can look at these. I hope that we'll engage in some sidebar conversations and talk about different things, but I want to really make sure that we bring those discussions back to those groups as well, and we want to report out so that we're sharing as a whole group the findings, the challenges, ideas about how to overcome some of those things, and to do it right, not just for the corridor, but for the projects that may be proposed in the future through those corridors, or maybe proposed in general. Maybe there's not even a corridor there, but where do we want things to go? Major infrastructure can have a big impact, and we hope that we can minimize that by doing it the best way possible. Next slide, Jim. So, a couple examples of what we have here. We're going to have, in our breakout groups, we'll have some dynamic, interactive GIS capabilities that we can pull up different layers and resources, ecology, whether it's or different geography. We can see existing infrastructure across the landscape, all to help bolster that conversation a little bit better, to look at where can we move things, where can we make things work. And also, what we've done here is we've taken our database for the BLM and looked at what's been authorized previously, prior to the corridor designations. When the corridors were designated, much of them followed existing infrastructure. I was thinking that, our goal is often to co-locate infrastructure with other infrastructure to minimize the footprint. We see new proposals coming through, things that were authorized in blue since that time. And we also can show some other pending applications that we have with BLM in sort of a light teal blue. You can kind of see, what we like to see is, if there's already a corridor here and it's infrastructure there, we like to see those proposals come through along those areas. It doesn't work in every case. Sometimes things get bumped out for one reason or another, whether it's a cultural reason, whether it's a wildlife reason, critical habitat, any number of things. There's also a need to find a route that is technically feasible, that industry can actually use. Otherwise, there's absolutely no purpose in having a corridor. Next slide, Jim. One more showing here a little bit of an example of where rights-of-way have gone across the landscape. And I bring this slide up to show a little bit of where the orange is where we have corridors, orange and yellow. And then the pink were things that were in place, authorized, infrastructure was already built prior to the corridor designations in 2009. And the blue is what happens even after that. And you can see where there's obviously a need to go from here to here, and that's the route that was ultimately shook out through the environmental review process. I don't know the exact date of that one, but we have that information available at our fingertips. We can look at that in the discussion. We can see other ones that were proposed, and it follows a route, but then it jogs down and out. Each one of these projects has a different story, and there's a lot of details to it. What we're trying to do, though, is come up with the best future planning that we can have for planning future needs. So we've gone through an effort with the Department of Energy to have a synthesis of existing reports made available. That was recently published, and to look at where does electricity and futures seem to be going. You know, what is the next demand? Jim, if you go to the next slide. So we have an available report here, synthesis of available studies that have been done, and
we did that because that was actually part of that framework that was given to us when we went to do these regional reviews. So that was part of the settlement agreement that suggested that we go out and get more information on seeing, again, the corridors are for preferred locations for future pipelines and power lines. And as Jeremy said, we can design them exactly where we want, but if it's not where industry needs them, they're not worthwhile. So the synthesis study was to go and look out about 10 years in the future, where are the energy needs? It was just completed, it is available on the website. We have a link on our project website, and it's a National Renewable Energy Lab study. So it's available for you. On the right, they're showing some needs for transmission in those red lines, in those, and they're explained in depth in the study. And those needs were identified by the Western Electricity Coordinating Council. So again, they went out, we didn't commission any new studies, but they went out and looked at existing studies, where are the needs. Interestingly enough, in the last 10 years, there was a very large push for long-distance transmission planning. So about 10 years in the future for that long-distance transmission planning, those needs may be met. We don't see a lot of that. We're pleased that we have industry here and other representatives here that can tell us more about transmission needs, particularly here in New Mexico. That's why we're here and here to listen to you. So the study is available on the websites, both websites. We encourage you to review it. And it did point out that if renewable energy development is more robust than anticipated, because all of these groups do long-range planning. So they've incorporated that into their long-range planning. But if renewable energy development is more robust than they've modeled, there will definitely be additional transmission needs. So that was one take-home. And what else was I going to say? Just in general, we're here to listen to you all and to industry. Where are the needs? And this gets to the point with the quarter reviews. We had a gentleman with us a year ago that summed up the regional review process as this. We need to identify potential adds, edits, or deletes to the corridors. Where do we need to add corridors? Where do we need to edit them? Or where would there be a need for some deletions? So this report gets to the adds. Where do we need to add corridors? We do have a map on the wall over here where we're asking people to draw in where they see a need for transmission as well. So we have this report. And we have the comment cards and other ways to get your input on where our corridor adds needed.
Sure. So Jan, do you know why they left out Path 48 from this study?
I looked at the original WEC studies, and we have Path 47, but not Path 48.
Path 48 is perhaps the biggest problem in the Western grid. It's been recognized as such for 35 years, and it creates loop flows that impact utilities all throughout the Western states by increasing line losses. And it's caused by, extreme weakness of Path 48. For example, Public Service New Mexico has an RFP out right now, and the main standard is bring us projects to help us with the Path 48 problem. So it's the biggest electrical problem in this area, and yet it's omitted from this.
Well, this is based on the case study, the WEC case study. So did the WEC
I think it was
leave it out?
Which case study was it, though?
2016 to 2026.
I think that when it was put together, either they're thinking that it will be covered by Colorado, it's a hit. And so maybe if you were doing a Colorado study, you would pick it up more, but it's actually northern New Mexico is the place where it
There's a path 20,
emanates from.
well, now we're getting all, but there's a path 23 that was in northern.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
interject, and this is great conversation, Lynn, and I
Well, we'll
appreciate
talk.
that.
And this
And
is why
this is
we're
exactly what
glad
we
you're
want
here.
to move forward and break out into groups. I just want to remind folks that we're here as a diverse group, and we need to hear all these different ideas. I encourage you to participate. I encourage you to challenge one another, but in a respectful way. And let's see, what else?
We're going to show a little bit of a...
We're gonna
just move on because we're behind schedule.
No, we're not. We're right on schedule.
Well, we're just going to move on.
Oh, we're not going to show that? Okay, that's fine.
We're gonna
Sorry, I didn't know
move
that.
forward. I want to make sure that there's good time for
Okay.
conversations, and
Okay, great.
that's what folks are
Okay,
here for today.
so with that, we're going to focus on 2 corridors this morning and 2 corridors this afternoon. And what we'd like to ask, and we're going to kind of see how this works, is we'd like you to go to the corridor that is of most interest to you this morning for the group discussion. So the 2 that we're going to be focusing on this morning are 81-213, which basically runs east-west across the, you want to point it out, Jeremy? Yeah.
Actually, Jim, would you mind bringing up that, go back a couple slides, and we can point out which corridors are where? Okay. Did you say
81-213.
So across southern Las Cruces area.
And then
So that one's going to be which side of the room?
That's going to be on this side of the room.
This side of the room.
Yeah. And then we're also going to be looking at 81-272.
Okay, north-south.
And that corridor's discussion is going to be on that side of the room. And don't worry if you're really interested in both, because here's the opportunity for group discussion and input. Once we have our group sessions this morning, then we're going to reconvene as a larger group and do report outs by both groups. And there'll be an opportunity then to make comments on the report outs, like, oh, did you think about this? Or I was really looking for this type of information. There will also be an opportunity in that report out session if there's some other concern that you have that you're not hearing, being raised in the discussions. So that'll be kind of our catch-all. And we'll be doing that from 11:15 to 11:45 after we take a break. But for now, we're going to break into these 2 groups, and if you need to take a quick break while you're doing that, that's fine, but we'd like to have everybody back and ready to start by 10:15.
Can you say which corridors are which, and we'll put a placard on.
Yeah, okay, so this one's going to be 81-213, which is the southernmost east-west district.
It's actually right up there on this, down here as well.
Zoom in, Matt.
81-213.
And then the other group down at that end of the room will be covering 81-272, which is north-south road, just above that. Okay, so great. Is everybody going to stay with this group? No. Let's have a show of hands. How many people are interested in the 81-213 corridor? We have a few. And then it seems like the rest of you that are interested in the other corridors.
Well, let's have a show of hands. How many are interested in the other roads right here, which are these airports? So what I think we have is people who have a general interest as well and don't necessarily interested in one another. What I would recommend is that as we use these discussions, where a lot of the issues that you run into in each corridor are common to all of the corridors. And so if you just pick one group or the other, you'll get that information and that discussion that you're looking for. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're just using these discussions to learn both specifically about that corridor and in general. So just pick one or the other. Also talk to us on the break, and we're going to have an opportunity after these breakdowns so that each group will tell the other group what was going on. And we've allowed enough time to talk about general issues then as well. That will occur before lunch.
Yes, sir.
By process of elimination, does that mean in the afternoon?
That's right.
And the other 2
That's right.
available?
Yes. And we really hope you will stay for the day. We really need to have your input here. But we promise to have you out by 3 o'clock. That's definitely, we're committed to that. So The other thing I might mention is if you have multiple people from an organization, agency, or group, just amongst yourself, you might divide up so that there's one or two of you in each group, so we can be sure that your views are at the table. So,
Andy and
yeah.
Jan, can I ask,
Yeah.
can we explain at all about folks who have interest in talking about more general things? When are we going to do that?
Yeah, so report out. As part of the report out.
Part of the report.
Yes, we'll not only listen to, we're going to pick a note taker and a group representative when we divide up into groups. And that person will be presenting the summary of the discussion for that group, whether it's 81-213 or 81-272, right? And then after we discuss that, there'll be an opportunity to have general discussion or comments at that point within the group, if that makes sense. Yes?
When will you introduce the other pending applications for designation?
The other
In
two
New Mexico, the
corridors?
The other
Those
suggestions.
corridor additions and things like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're in both of those sessions, so morning and afternoon, we will make sure there's enough time to go into corridor ads.
So what I'd like folks to do is to, if you're interested in talking more about the north-south corridor, 81272, we're going to have to separate these rooms just a little bit, and we'll put up the divider so that we can have good discussions without kind of too much noise both ways. So what we'll have to do is have folks take their chairs or turn them around to that side of the room if that's where they want to be, and we'll just reorganize and we'll come back together and get going on discussion.